Hi everyone, Professor Elam here. I just wanted to do a really quick micro lecture on Chapter 8, which talks about communication. And in particular, I wanted to talk to you about communication barriers. Okay, so what are communication barriers? So barriers are anything that distorts you getting effective communication. And effective communication is different than communication. Effective communication is understanding the message the way it was intended, the way it was originally intended. So, some barriers to communication could be physical, they could be psychological, they could be cultural, they could be emotional, they could be technological, but there are multiple barriers to communication. And remember, your goal, as future business executives of the world, is you will be spending the vast majority of your time communicating. So you want to make sure that you are providing effective communication and also actively listening to the communication that you receive so that you can decipher it and also understand it the way it was intended. Okay, so communication barriers are obstacles that prevent the clear exchange of information. These are physical barriers, they could be noise or distance, psychological and emotional barriers like prejudices, stress, lack of trust, cultural and language differences, which oftentimes are perceptual issues. So those could be like differing viewpoints. And then, of course, technology and what we all struggle with, lack of clarity within the message itself. Okay, so let's start out with some of the physical barriers. So physical barriers could be noise or distance. And what that actually means is noise is anything in the environment that distracts you. So it doesn't even have to be like loud noise, how you're picturing that word. It could be anything. Noise could be you being hungry. Noise could be you being tired. Noise could be you're sitting there and you have to go to the bathroom. It's something that is going on. Being sick is noise. It's anything that distracts you from hearing the message as it was intended. And then there's distance, and distance is physical separation between communicators, which can reduce nonverbal cues. So when we've got that distance from each other, and we're communicating, a lot of times we don't get those physical cues because they say 80% of all communication is nonverbal. So we can tell a lot about what someone is thinking, how they're receiving the message by their nonverbal cues, how they carry themselves. Are they making eye contact with you? Are they smiling? What's the tone in their voice? Are they looking away? Do they seem bored? How are they holding their posture? Are they making eye contact with you? All of these are nonverbal cues. So if we're not able to physically see each other because of distance, that could be an issue. The nonverbal part of it, which plays into because you want to be really good at reading people's cues, which we're going to talk about here in this class, Human Relations in Business, which is just a great class that you will use, parts of it all throughout your career. So it's really about being able to connect with people. And that's key to your success, especially in business. And then there are psychological barriers. So, psychological barriers could be prejudices and stereotypes. So, these are assumptions that we make about people on preconceived notions. So, when we make these assumptions about somebody, say somebody comes, walking in the room and they look scary or they're all tatted up, you might make these unfair assumptions about them. And you want to make sure not to do that. Everybody, no matter how they look, where they're from, what they do for a living. Everybody deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. So, we have to put our prejudices and our stereotypes aside in order to be effective communicators. And then lack of attention or interest. This is another psychological barrier to communication, and that is when a receiver isn't paying attention or finds the message irrelevant. So that also hinders understanding. So I don't really understand something because I wasn't interested enough in it to pay attention to the message that was being said. And then jumping to conclusions is another psychological barrier, which is all about making assumptions without having all the facts. So it's misinterpretation. And then there are also cultural and language barriers, which would be language differences. So that could be differences in your vocabulary, your grammar, your pronunciation. Accents make it difficult to understand people sometimes. And then cultural norms. Different cultural backgrounds can lead to varying communication styles. I just got back from Italy not too long ago, and they're very passionate, when they communicate with each other, and it almost looks like they're arguing, but they're not. They're just communicating with each other. They use a lot of hands, and they're loud and aggressive how they get their point across, and oh my God, it's great to see. But anyways, yeah, it's just a different type of communication style because of that specific culture. And then, of course, some emotional barriers to communication might be, our emotional state. How well am I going to perceive your message today if my feelings are hurt, or I'm angry, or I am frustrated about something? So that can also, when I'm relaying that, if I've already got a lot on my mind or I feel overwhelmed, that could distort the message as well because I'm letting all these other emotions get involved in the message, which distorts the message. And then lack of confidence is another emotional barrier. So when individuals' low confidence can make them hesitant to communicate at all because, maybe they don't feel like they understand the content that well, or maybe they don't feel like they understand the job that well, or they don't have enough respect for themselves to think that you're actually going to listen to what they have to say. So, lack of confidence can be a huge barrier to communication. A lot of people that are shy are not going to communicate as effectively or as much as necessary as maybe somebody that is more confident and confident in what it is they have to say, so they understand the importance of their feelings and of expressing those feelings. So there's all different kinds of barriers to communication. One of the ones that you're going to deal with as a manager is going to be filtering. And that filtering is you'll have to decide what type of information you want to withhold. Your marching orders are going to come from above. So, your boss is going to tell you, I need A, B, C, and D done. Then you're going to take that message, you're going to understand it, you're going to look it over, and then you're going to decide. Your boss told you that you need to do A, B, C, and D. What do your employees need to know from this? They don't need to know everything. So that's going to be one of your jobs as an effective manager, is to decipher what type of filtering that is. And you're not necessarily going to say, my boss told me we have to do A, B, and C, and D. You're going to make that your own. We need to do A and C. You're going to own those words, and you're going to decide how to filter out that communication, and then you're going to send that message. So filtering will be a large part of what you do as an effective manager. And then, we have to also do selective perception. So small things can command our attention, like when we're visiting a new place, we take in, we take in all the sights, we've never been there before. I think about the last time I was in New York City. Oh my gosh, you take in all the sights, you've really got those high perceptions going. But when you're in the office, are you really taking in everything that's going on around you? So are you really taking in all the conversations that you're having throughout the day? So, we're in the office 8 or 9 hours a day. So how much of that information are we taking in? So that is an example of selective perception. Because a lot of us have information overload. So there's so much information all the time. A lot of times it's hard to remember it, and there's so much of it. So information overload would be another example of communication barriers. Okay, I will stop right there. Just a little mini lecture. As always, I'm here if you have any questions, concerns about anything. You all have my phone number, and you're doing a great job in this class. So take care and have a fabulous day.